May 1st, 1960. Early morning. Pakistan. American pilot Francis Gary Powers is putting on his pressure suit. In a few minutes, he will climb to an altitude of 20 kilometers, higher than any Soviet aircraft can reach, higher than any Soviet missile can fly. He has flown this route dozens of times. He is not afraid. He does not know that today everything will be different, and that this flight will change history. Let us start from the beginning. 1965, the height of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union eye each other with mounting paranoia. American intelligence wants to know one thing: how many nuclear bombs does the USSR have? Where are the missiles? Where are the secret facilities? But how do you find out? Soviet airspace is closed. Spies get caught. Diplomats can only report what they see from the embassy window. And so, the CIA commissions a ghost aircraft. It flies at altitudes of 20 to 21 kilometers. Soviet interceptors cannot reach it. Their operational ceiling is 17 to 18 kilometers. Soviet surface-to-air missiles cannot touch it, not in 1955. The plane carries cameras that can photograph an object the size of a tennis ball from 20 kilometers up. And for 5 years, from 1955 to 1960, the U-2 flies over the Soviet Union with complete impunity. The Americans photograph everything: Baikonur, the Semipalatskin nuclear test site, secret factories, military bases. Soviet radar tracks the plane on every mission. Soviet pilots scramble to intercept it, and every single time they cannot reach it. Khrushchev is furious. Nikita Khrushchev was not a man who hid his feelings. He could bang his shoe on the table at the United Nations. He could say things to Western leaders' faces that made diplomats go pale. And yet this man was forced to watch in silence as an American aircraft crossed his country again and again and again. Soviet diplomats filed official protests. The United States denied everything. What reconnaissance plane? That was a weather observation aircraft, a scientific mission. There was nothing. Khrushchev knew the truth. The Americans knew he knew, and they kept denying it anyway. The humiliation was total. The Soviet Union had a satellite in orbit. It was preparing to send animals into space. It had nuclear weapons, and it could not shoot down a spy plane flying 20 kilometers above its own territory. But in October 1959, something changed. Over Beijing, a Soviet S-75 surface-to-air missile system shoots down a Taiwanese reconnaissance aircraft at an altitude of 20,600 meters, higher than the U-2 flies. The information is classified. Officially, it is announced that an interceptor aircraft brought the plane down. But Khrushchev now knows the tool exists. In April 1960, he makes his decision. The next U-2 that enters Soviet airspace will be shot down, regardless of the risks, regardless of the international scandal that would follow. Enough. Powers takes off from the American base in Peshawar, Pakistan. The route passes directly over the most sensitive facilities in the Soviet Union: Baikonur, the plutonium production plant at Chelyabinsk 40, dozens of other classified sites. The final destination: Norway. Powers does not know that Soviet radar has been tracking him since the moment he crossed the border, does not know that the commanders of the anti-aircraft missile divisions have received their orders: shoot it down. Around 9 in the morning Moscow time, the area near Sverdlovsk, the first S-75 missile detonates behind the aircraft. Shrapnel tears through the tail assembly. The U-2 begins to break apart. Powers understands the aircraft cannot be saved. He tries to get out of the cockpit. The ejection seat is not an option. Activating it automatically triggers the plane's self-destruct mechanism, and Powers is afraid it will destroy him along with it. He climbs out manually. At 5 kilometers altitude, he jumps. Below him, the endless Ural taiga. The chances of landing anywhere near a village are almost zero, but Powers is lucky. He lands on the outskirts of a small village. Local residents stare at him in bewilderment. Within minutes, men in uniform arrive. The game is over. When Powers is searched, Soviet authorities find what the Soviet press will later call a complete spy kit. A pistol with a silencer, a poisoned needle for silently eliminating a witness or himself, Soviet rubles, gold coins and jewelry, universal currency for bribery, an inflatable dinghy, and, most importantly, rolls of film containing thousands of photographs of Soviet classified facilities. Enough evidence for 3 separate espionage trials. And here, Khrushchev does something masterful. The Soviet side officially announces an American aircraft has been shot down near Sverdlovsk, but says nothing about the pilot, and waits. The United States immediately issues an official statement. A plane? Yes, there was a plane, a weather research aircraft, studying atmospheric conditions over Turkey. The pilot apparently lost consciousness from oxygen deprivation. The aircraft drifted off course and accidentally crossed the Soviet border. No espionage, no reconnaissance flights, nothing of the kind. Khrushchev reads this statement and smiles, because he has a live pilot who has already told him everything. A few days later, Khrushchev steps to the microphone and says, "Now I must share something rather interesting. The pilot is alive, and he is telling a very different story." President Eisenhower is caught lying in front of the entire world. For the first time in history, an American president is forced to publicly admit, yes, we were spying. It was a reconnaissance mission. I personally authorized it. August 17, 1960. Moscow, the Hall of Columns. Packed with journalists, diplomats, and representatives of Soviet workers' collectives. At the center, Powers in a neat dark suit. Judges in pale generals' dress uniforms. The prosecutor in black. The legendary Roman Rudenko, the same man who had prosecuted Nazi war criminals at the Nuremberg trials. Powers admits everything, answers questions clearly, provides the required assessments. The prosecutor asks for 15 years. The court is merciful. Powers receives 10. February 1962. Berlin. The Glienicke Bridge, the border between West and East Berlin. Fog. Dawn. On one side of the bridge, American intelligence officers with Powers. On the other, Soviet officers with Rudolf Abel, real name William Fisher, a Soviet illegal intelligence officer who had operated in the United States for years under deep cover. Arrested in 1957. Both men begin walking towards each other. In the middle of the bridge, they pass each other without a word. Each walks to his own side. This exchange will go down in history as one of the most famous espionage episodes of the Cold War. It will be depicted in films. Books will be written about it. 55 years later, Steven Spielberg will make a movie about it, Bridge of Spies. What did this single mission cost the world? First, a summit that never happened. In May 1960, a meeting between Khrushchev and Eisenhower was scheduled to take place in Paris, the first personal contact between the leaders of the two superpowers. Khrushchev arrived in Paris, sat down at the table, and demanded a public apology from Eisenhower. Eisenhower refused. Khrushchev stood up and walked out. The summit was over before it began. The thaw was finished. A new spiral of the Cold War had begun, one that led directly to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. One plane, one flight, one decision by Khrushchev to shoot it down, and the world found itself one step closer to nuclear